A year ago, Paul O'Neill was fired from his job as George Bush's Treasury Secretary for disagreeing too many times with the president's policy on tax cuts. Tonight, O'Neill, who is known for speaking his mind, talks for the first time about his 2 years inside the Bush administration. His story is the centerpiece of a new book being published this week about the way the Bush White House is run. Entitled The Price of Loyalty, the book, by a former Wall Street Journal reporter, draws on interviews with high-level officials who gave the author their personal accounts of meetings with the president, their notes and documents. But the main source of the book was Paul O'Neill. Paul O'Neill says he's going public because he thinks the Bush administration has been too secretive about how decisions have been made.
Contrary to how we practice politics today in this country, there is some market for the truth.
Somebody's going to call it a kiss and tell book.
I've come to believe that people will say damn near anything, so I'm sure somebody will say all of that and more.
O'Neill, who was George Bush's top economic policy official, says in the book that the president did not make decisions in a methodical way. There was no free flow of ideas or open debate. At cabinet meetings, he says the president was like a blind man in a room full of deaf people. There is no discernible connection, forcing top officials to act on little more than hunches about what the president might think. This is what O'Neill says happened at his first hour-long one-on-one meeting with Mr. Bush.
I went in with a long list of things to talk about, and I thought to engage on. And as the book says, I was surprised that it turned out me talking and the president just listening.
He never asked a single question.
As I recall, it was mostly a monologue.
President Bush was disengaged, at least on domestic issues, he says, and that disturbed him.
This is a photograph of President Nixon. That's me there.
He told us that wasn't his experience when he worked as a top official under Presidents Nixon and Ford, or the way he ran things when he was chairman of Alcoa. O'Neill readily agreed to tell his story to the book's author, Ron Suskind. O'Neill says he's taking no money for his part in the book. You interviewed how many other people?
Oh, hundreds of people.
Hundreds?
Hundreds of people.
How many other cabinet members?
Several. Let's just say several.
But O'Neill is the only one who spoke on the record. Didn't someone in this administration, high up, call him on the phone and warn him not to do this book?
Yes, yes.
And who was it?
Don Rumsfeld.
Was it a warning or a threat?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it was the White House concerned, understandably, because O'Neill has spent extraordinary amounts of time with the president. They said this could really be the one moment where things are revealed.
And they are. Not only did O'Neill give Suskind his time, he gave him 19,000 internal documents.
I mean, everything's there. Memoranda to the president, handwritten thank you notes, 100-page documents, stuff that's sensitive,
Stuff that's sensitive.
Right, yeah.
Transcripts of private meetings?
Yeah, in some cases.
High level?
Yep. National Security Council, you don't get higher than that.
And what happened at President Bush's very first National Security Council meeting is one of O'Neill's most startling revelations.
From the very beginning, there was a conviction that Saddam Hussein was a bad person and that he needed to go.
He says that going after Saddam Hussein was topic A 10 days after the inauguration, 8 months before September 11th.
From the very first instance, it was about Iraq, it was about what we can do to change this regime.
Now, everybody else thought that grew out of 9/11.
No.
But this book says it was day one of this administration.
Day one, these things were laid and sealed.
As Treasury Secretary, O'Neill was a permanent member of the National Security Council. He says in the book he was surprised at the meeting that questions such as why Saddam and why now were never asked. It's all about finding a way to do it. That was the tone of it. The president saying, go find me a way to do this.
For me, the notion of preemption, that the U.S. has the unilateral right to do whatever we decide to do, is a really huge leap.
And that came up at this first meeting.
It did.
O'Neill told us the discussion of Iraq continued at the next National Security Council meeting 2 days later. He got briefing materials under this cover sheet.
There are memos. One of them, marked secret, says, plan for post-Saddam Iraq.
Nation building.
Absolutely.
So they discussed an occupation of Iraq.
In January and February of 2001.
Based on his interviews with O'Neill and several other officials at the meetings, Susskind writes that the planning envisioned peacekeeping troops, war crimes tribunals, and even divvying up Iraq's oil wealth. Susskind obtained this Pentagon document dated March 5, 2001, entitled Foreign Suitors for Iraqi Oil Field Contracts. It includes a map of potential areas for exploration.
It talks about contractors around the world from, 30, 40 countries, and which ones have what intentions or
on oil
in Iraq.
During the campaign, candidate Bush had criticized the Clinton-Gore administration for being too interventionist.
If we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, then we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road, and I'm going to prevent that.
The president had just run a campaign about being humble and not engaging in nation building.
The thing that's most surprising, I think, is how emphatically, from the very first, this administration had said X during the campaign, but from the first day was often doing Y, not just saying Y, but actively moving toward the opposite of what they had said during the election.
But the president had promised to cut taxes, and he did. Within 6 months of taking office, he pushed $1 trillion worth of tax cuts through Congress.
This is significant, and this is only the beginning.
But O'Neill thought it should have been the end. After 9/11 and the war in Afghanistan, the budget deficit was growing. So, at a meeting with the vice president after the midterm elections in 2002, Susskind writes that O'Neill argued against a second round of tax cuts.
Cheney, at this moment, shows his hand. He says, Paul, Reagan proved that deficits don't matter. We won the midterm elections. This is our due.
We earned it.
Exactly.
What does O'Neill think?
O'Neill is speechless.
It was not just about not winning the tax cut, it was about how to use the nation's resources to improve the condition of our society. And I thought the weight of working on Social Security and fundamental tax reform was a lot more important than a tax reduction.
Did you think it was irresponsible?
Well, it's for sure not what I would have done.
O'Neill accuses Vice President Dick Cheney of not being an honest broker, but with a handful of others, part of a Praetorian Guard that encircled the president to block out contrary views. O'Neill says this is the way Dick likes it. Meanwhile, the White House was losing patience with O'Neill. He was becoming known for a series of off-the-cuff remarks his critics called gaffes. One of them sent the dollar into a nosedive and required major damage control. Twice during stock market meltdowns, O'Neill was not available to the president. He was out of the country, one time on a trip to Africa with the Irish rock star Bono.
Africa made an enormous splash. It was like a road show. He comes back, and the president says to him at a meeting, says, you're getting quite a cult following. And it clearly was not a joke, and it was not said in jest. It was.
Susskind writes that the relationship grew more tense and that the president took a jab at O'Neill in public at an economic forum in Texas.
And I'm just honored to be sitting beside one of my heroes.
Who, O'Neill? We found one, O'Neill.
The two men were never close. O'Neill was not amused when Mr. Bush began calling him the Big O. He thought the president's habit of giving people nicknames was a form of bullying. Everything came to a head for O'Neill at a November 2002 meeting at the White House of the economic team.
Well, it's a huge meeting. You've got Dick Cheney from the, secure location on the video. The president is there.
Susskind, who was given a nearly verbatim transcript by someone who attended the meeting, says everyone expected Mr. Bush to rubber stamp the plan under discussion, a big new tax cut. But according to Susskind, the president was perhaps having second thoughts about cutting taxes again and was uncharacteristically engaged.
He asks, haven't we already given money to rich people? This second tax cut's going to do it again.
The president himself says, but we already gave it to the rich people?
Yes. He says,
why are we doing it again?
Why are we doing it again?
He says,
why are we doing it again? Now, his advisors, they say, well, Mr. President, the upper class, they're the entrepreneurs. That's the standard response. And the president kind of goes, okay, that's the response. And then he comes back to it again. Well, shouldn't we be giving money to the middle? Won't people be able to say, you did it once and then you did it twice, and what was it good for?
But according to the transcript, White House political advisor Karl Rove jumped in.
Karl Rove is saying to the president a kind of mantra, stick to principle, stick to principle. He says it over and over again.
And he's saying stick and don't waver.
Don't waver.
In the end, the president didn't. And 9 days after that meeting, in which O'Neill made it clear he could not publicly support another tax cut, the vice president called and asked him to resign. With the deficit now climbing toward $400 billion, O'Neill maintains he was in the right. But look at the economy today.
Yes,
Can't the White House say, look, we were right and O'Neill was wrong?
Well, in the last quarter, the growth rate was 8.2%.
Wow.
It was terrific.
Is it because of the tax cut?
I think the tax cut made a difference, but without the tax cut, we would have had 6% real growth and the prospect of dealing with transformation of Social Security and fundamentally fixing the tax system. And to me, those were compelling competitors against more tax cuts.
While in the book, O'Neill comes off as constantly appalled at Mr. Bush, he was surprised when I told him I found his portrait of the president unflattering.
You really think so?
Are you joking?
No,
Are you teasing me?
No, I'm not at all. I tell you,
it really jumps out.
I'll be darned.
You're giving me the impression that you're just going to be stunned if they attack you for this book. And they're going to say, I predict, it's sour grapes. He's getting back because he was fired.
I will be really disappointed if they react that way, because I think they'll be hard put.
But are you prepared for it?
Well, I don't think I need to be, because I can't imagine that I'm going to be attacked for telling the truth. Why would I be attacked for telling the truth? White House spokesman Scott McClellan was asked about the book on Friday and said, "The president is someone that leads and acts decisively on our biggest priorities, and that is exactly what he'll continue to do."